appreciate all of you coming out tonight. I'm proud to be here on campus. I was here as a junior in high school. I went to Boys State here. I remember marching the cadences down the campus and going into the cafeteria. Great week of my life. Went back and ran for mayor and was elected, Mr. President, Mayor of Tishomingo. So I still live in Tishomingo. Does everyone know where Tishomingo is? Any of you know where Tishomingo is? All right. How many college Republicans are here? This is sponsored by the College Republican Group, and we have a few here. I was a college Republican at East Central University when I was in college and enjoyed those days there. I'm excited to see a conservative movement on campus because many of you know, much of our liberal movement in this country began on college campuses. I live in Tishomingo. It's a town of 3,200 people down on the Texas border, but it is on this side of the Red River. I remind people when I get up north. My wife is a pre-K teacher. We have two children. Madison is 12 years old. She was at a track meet today, and I couldn't watch it because I was out campaigning. My son Price is 15 years old. We are very average American people. We've lived the American dream. I was raised in the Tishomingo Dairy Queen. My grandparents owned and operated the Dairy Queen, and I worked my way through school, college, and law school flipping hamburgers at the Dairy Queen. And I've been on Main Street for 10 years in Tishomingo practicing law. I serve as city attorney for the city of Tishomingo and attorney to the Industrial Authority and some of the other government organizations there. But I've been a conservative my whole life. I registered to vote on my 18th birthday as a Republican. And down where I live, it's called Little Dixie. Some of you may have heard that term. There are not a lot of Republicans, especially 18 years ago when I registered to vote. So I'm very proud that Oklahoma has begun to turn more conservative. But I've watched our country over the last 10 years, and I've been concerned about the direction that we're going. And I know that you all are concerned as well, or you wouldn't be here tonight. I want to tell you, although I'm a conservative, although I'm a Republican, I'm not here to cast all the blame on the Democrats. I have a lot of blame that I cast on the Republicans as well. We can do better as a conservative people, both on the Republican side as well, and we need to move this country in a more conservative direction. Let me tell you all what has concerned me. As I've been on Main Street for 10 years, I have a business. I have 5 secretaries. I make a payroll. I contribute to my local community day in and day out. I've watched as our federal government has grown and grown and grown. Do you all know that tonight we owe $15.3 trillion in this country? That's a lot of money. $1 trillion, if you spent $1 a second, 24 hours a day, it would take 32,000 years to spend just $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. At the end of this year, we'll owe $16 trillion, and today we borrowed $4.8 billion. Think of it this way. Our federal government spends about $10 billion a day, and we're borrowing about $4.8 billion of that. We borrow 43% of every dollar we spend. 43% of every dollar we spend. Now, could this college operate if it had to borrow from the bank 43% of every dollar? Jay, could your business operate? No, you'd be out of business, but that's what our federal government is doing. 48% of Americans last year did not pay any income tax, as Wayne alluded to. We have a lot of issues, and I think I'm a big picture person, and I really do believe that what we have gotten away from are many of our founding constitutional principles. At OU, I was president of the Federalist Society. That was the James Madison group of thinkers. I really do believe that our federal government was very limited in its creation. Our federal government was intended to provide a national defense and to protect our freedoms. The regulation of our day-to-day lives, ladies and gentlemen, by our founding fathers was intended to take place at the state level. For those of you who are students who haven't read the 10th Amendment, get your Constitution tonight and turn to the 10th Amendment and read it. It's very clear. All rights not specifically enumerated to the federal government are hereby reserved to the states. Yet we see our federal government doing things that only our founding fathers would be rolling over in their graves if they knew what the federal government was doing. I hear example day in and day out, and I know that you all do too, and for sake of time I won't go into many of those examples. But the fact of the matter is we need congressmen and congresswomen in Washington who will look at every bill with this question in mind. Does this expand our federal government beyond what our founding fathers intended? And if it does, we shouldn't pass those bills. If it does, we should restrict back our federal government to its original intent and its original purpose. I do believe that our best days are ahead of us. I am very optimistic about our future. I do believe we are at the pinnacle of a very liberal movement, and we're going to go down in the other direction when we after this election. I do believe we'll start moving in a more conservative direction. I don't think, though, and I want to be real clear, I'm not a libertarian. And I want to be real clear about that. I do believe there is a role for government. I believe there's a very specific role that our founding fathers intended for government. All of us have been benefited by a good government. And we have seen the World War II generation bestow upon our generation the best government in the history of the world. Our Constitution has allowed this country To be the longest living republic in the history of the world, that's fascinating if you think about that. I do believe there's a very good purpose for government, but it is not the vast, expansive government that we are seeing in this day and age, and we need to get it in check. I do believe that we need to take the big picture approach, as I've said, and look at restricting it back. So I'm very optimistic about the future. I do believe we need to elect people, though, to Congress that will hold Congress accountable to its constitutional responsibilities. For you students tonight, read Article 1, Section 8. It sets forth Congress's duties. Congress has very specific duties and responsibilities it is given in the Constitution. But day in and day out, we see a lot of those through legislation being given to the executive branch. The White House, whether it's Democrat or Republican, is more powerful than it's ever been in the history of our country. A lot of Congress's responsibilities have been given to the executive branch. The Federal Reserve is a perfect example that Wayne talked about. It is Congress's duty under Article 1, Section 8 to coin and regulate our currency. But in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, and most of that constitutional authority was given over to the White House, to the executive branch. Those are things that we need to look at, a big picture approach. Let's get back to the framework that was laid out. And I think if we do that, I do think we can have a better future for our children and our grandchildren. We can cut down a lot of the debt that we are now borrowing. So I would be honored to have your vote. I'd be honored to have your support. I'd be honored to have your prayers. Nicole and I are on the road every night. This is a big district. If you haven't seen the map, Wayne has a copy of it. I didn't bring my copy in. It runs from the Texas border to the Kansas border. It's 26 counties in eastern Oklahoma. But I do believe just because we're a large rural district that we can still have an impact in Washington. I believe we can elect a leader that can have a seat at the table and have a very impactful movement in moving the conservative agenda forward. We have some good leaders in Congress, but I think we need more. And I think we need to send someone from this district who can be a leader. Being a congressman, ladies and gentlemen, is not about pushing a button. We could send anyone to go push a button. There's only 2 buttons, yes or no. Anybody could do that. And many of us would push the same button if we were elected. But who can be a leader back in the committee rooms to move the conservative agenda forward that understands the Constitution? That's the crux of being a good congressman. And I commit to you, if you send me to Washington, that's exactly what I will do. I've been fighting for the conservative values my whole life, and I will be honored to represent you in Washington. Thank you again for having us. Do I have time for one question?
I think you might be able to time for
one question. Wow.
All right.
I probably should have used all my time. I'll probably be excited. I knew he had a good moment. I thought that guy on the back raised his hand. Jay, what do you think?
Dustin, you talked about going in the bills. Do you believe in one vote, one bill, meaning not a bunch of things put into a bill and tied it together? Will you work to strive that we don't have so much hidden things in the bills? You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I was asked the question yesterday, Dustin, will you read every bill before you vote on it? Do you know some of these bills are 20,000 pages?
Right.
And they give you 2 hours to read it? So the bills do need to be streamlined, I think. I think the reason they tack them full is so that you won't read them and you won't know what's in them or you wouldn't vote for your team anyway. And so I hope to have a good staff to help me go through every single bill and understand what's in it. And those bills, Jay, are actually bills in the committees, and the chairman has so much influence. I don't think a freshman member of Congress necessarily have a lot of influence on that, but I would hope to have as much influence as I could to limit the bills to one topic, one subject, and each bill be voted on accordingly. I think that's the way our founding fathers intended it, the way Oklahoma does it, and it's the way it should be done. Excellent question. One more?
Anybody got a quick question?
Let me just follow up by saying this. Education has changed my life. I was raised, my grandparents worked at the Dairy Queen, my parents worked at the Dairy Queen. Education has changed my life and my wife's life. And this district has 8 excellent colleges. And I'll be very honored to be a cheerleader for higher education in this district. I do think Eastern Oklahoma has the opportunity to train and educate our citizens and be a bright and shining light for a technologically advanced future. And I want to encourage you to keep in mind what wonderful resources we have here. And being on a higher education campus, I'll be remiss if I didn't point that out. And so, Mr. President, I thank you for letting us do it.